And when I was in Russia recently, I said, look, I'm from the U.S. and you're from Russia. In the U.S., in a week, we have 168 hours. How many hours do you have in a week here in Kazan or Ekaterinburg? And they went, what? How many hours do you guys have? And they said, and some of them say 40. I say, no, you don't have 40 hours. A day has 24 hours times 7. It's 168 hours. So the point is that you have the same number of hours that I have or anybody else has. So here's my question to you. Could you slice off, like a slice of salami, could you slice off 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, in order to become one of the highest paid people in your field? To live in a big house on a hill and drive a beautiful car, put your kids in private school, and go to fabulous vacations in the South Seas in Europe. Could you invest 2 hours a day, 5 days a week? And people say, well, yes, of course I could do that. I said, good, then do it. You can all go home now. Seminar's over. But the point is, you say, well, that's too simple. It's too simple. Yes, it is. It is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple because you're surrounded by so many temptations to do so many things that are fun and easy. But if you have the discipline and the skill, and so what they found is that young people, and I found myself doing this when I was in my early 20s, even I was traveling. I'd work and I'd make some success in sales, and I'd have a little apartment, and I'd go out and I'd buy a cheap desk. One time, I still remember, this cheap desk was this wide, and it was on bricks or something, and I would work at this desk. I always had a desk, and I would always come home at night and study. And I didn't know that till many, many years later that I was doing the right thing. But I just had this hunger to learn new stuff. And if you have this 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Ben Feldman, who became the greatest salesman in the world. Anybody here remember Ben Feldman? Only a few people remember him because he's dead now. But Ben Feldman resolved to study 2 hours a night, 5 days a week, in his little house in, not East Lansing, but in East Liverpool. East Liverpool. It's a very famous story. Came from a poor family in New York. They said he tried to get into World War II, but he had flat feet, so they said they'll only take him as a salesman if he leaves New York, because he was round, he had a big nose, he had a flat head, he had a big belly, he had, and they said, we don't want you to selling in New York because you just don't fit the image. I think it was metropolitan life. And so he moved to this little town that had something like 42,000 people. And he said, if you stay here, you can have a job as an insurance salesman. And he did, and he stayed there for the rest of his life. And he made all his sales within 50 miles of his home, so he could be home at night to have dinner with his family and his kids. And then after dinner, put the kids to bed, and he would go and study for 2 hours. He was doing that 50 years later. He was doing that when he was earning almost $15 million a year in straight commission. And he's making one sale at a time to one person at a time within driving distance of his home. And he studied 2 hours each night, 5 days a week. Became the highest paid salesman in the history of the world. Guinness Book of Records and everything else. In other words, it's eminently doable. The guy was considered to have no potential whatsoever to sell insurance, and he became the greatest. So could you do it? Yes. If you had the D word. What's the D word? Discipline. Discipline. That D word. Geez, that hurts. All right. So here's the second. Now this is what some people earn. They earn 10 times as much as other people, 80, 20, and so on. And the question is, how? Oops, here we go. The question is, how? How do they get to this lower income, to this higher income? And the answer is, it's determined by your knowledge and skill. And I'll keep saying it, sometimes you're only one skill away. When I was struggling and living in a little rooming house, and sleeping on a couch, and so on, I knew that there's got to be something, and I realized it was closing the sale. So I decided that I was going to do what these people in the studies do, is I was going to study sales closing techniques. And I was going to study them, get up in the morning, study them, practice them during the day, review them in the evening. I did this over and over again, and I was astonished at how fast you could learn to be good at closing sales. And my sales went up and up and up. Within a year, I was earning 10 times as much as I'd ever earned in my life. And I was earning more than the person who steered me in the direction of continuous learning. Just simply by one skill. And if I told you that, if you became absolutely excellent at closing sales. And I'm not talking about high pressure. I'm talking about warmth, friendliness, helpfulness, establishing friendships, helping people, and so on, overcoming their concerns and objections, and getting them to make a decision. You could all do that. Everybody here could double their income, triple their income, increase it 5 times. And I know because I've now found people like this who've gone through my courses all over the world. They say it's just revolutionary. One skill is like a dynamite detonator. Boom. But your job is to pick the skill. Your job is to pick the shot. Okay, so we say here, we say here is you are extraordinary. You have special talents and abilities that you can use to achieve all your goals in life. And what are they? Now, you heard that what Howard was saying, what Zeke made famous, God don't make no junk. God don't make no junk. Well, what God does is he implants in each person special talents, skills, abilities, attributes from childhood, from infancy. You come into the world loaded with these special skills. Now, you don't have more than 2 or 3. You can't be like Michael Jordan tried to get into baseball. After becoming the top basketball player in the world, he thought he'd go into baseball and become a top baseball player. Well, he got over that fairly quickly. It's because his skill was in basketball, was in dumping baskets, and he became the best in the world at it. So each person here is designed, like that designed for greatness, each person is designed with the potential to be absolutely excellent at something. And your great job in life, and only 2% of people do this, according to the psychologist Abraham Maslow, your great job in life is to find out what that is. And the way you can find out what it is you'll find you'll always be attracted to that area of activity where you are most likely to be absolutely excellent. You'll be interested in it. You'll admire people who are good at it. You'll want to read about it and learn about it. You'll want to do it in your spare time. You'll do it even if you're not paid. There's always a sort of it grabs you and it pulls you toward you. Your job it is a latent skill. In other words, it's there, but you have to develop it. It's like a beautiful farm with beautiful land, but you have to cultivate the soil, and you have to plant it, and you have to fertilize it, and so on. So each person has the ability, and what are they? What are your special abilities? This is the great skill. It's our job as parents, by the way, is to create an environment where our children can flourish like beautiful, rich soil. They can flourish, and they can find the skill area. And if it hasn't been done for you, then you have to do it yourself. And by the way, it's good when you do this because you're happy all the time when you're working away at becoming good at something that you really enjoy. You're just happy all the time. You don't have to be marched out at gunpoint to get better at it. You can hardly wait. You want to get up in the morning and do it. I remember I'm a writer. I've written now 84 books, believe it or not. And I have several books on the production line. And I came across this line about a painter. And they said, how can you tell if you're a painter or if you're born to be a painter? And the line was really great. It said, a painter is someone who cannot not paint. Wow, that applies to so many areas of life. A certain person who cannot not paint. And then I realized that a writer is someone who cannot not write. A person in the right field for them is someone who cannot not be in that field. If it doesn't work out, they try something else and they try something else. So you'll always enjoy doing what you were put on this earth to do. You cannot stop from getting back to it. Now, I found when I was working with my 1,000 or more, it's now more than 10,000 business owners and entrepreneurs, is that there's only 4 ways to change your life. And I've, again, written books on this and given lectures, but there's only 4 ways, and they are, number 1, is you can do more of some things. And so the question you begin to ask, if you want to double your income, improve the quality of your business, improve the quality of any part of your life, is what should you be doing more of? And the answer is you should be doing more of those things that are working for you. And you would say, oh, that's pretty obvious. Yes, but it's amazing how many people spend an enormous amount of time working on things that are not doing them any good at all. Sitting around drinking coffee, shooting the breeze with your friends, and checking email is a completely zero space activity. And yet people do it hour after hour, 3.5, 3.7 hours a day. People are busy playing with their screens. They call them screenagers today. They're all screenagers. And the more of it you do, the more addicted you become to it. Pretty soon you get up to the point where you get up in the morning to check you get up in the night to check your email. You get up in the night to check your spam, to check the garbage stuff that's been sent to you. Or the first thing you do in the morning, you get up and turn it on, and you check before you get out of bed. And you go downstairs and you check, and you walk down. They have laws now in cities like New York where it is illegal to walk while texting. Because people who are walking while texting are walking straight into other people, straight into posts and smashing their face, straight into traffic and being hit by trucks. So now you know here, you're not allowed to drive and text. It's now a law in most countries, most states, most cities. But in this case, now you can't even walk while texting because it's so distracting and it's so useless. So you can do more of some things. So the question you should be asking is, what should I be doing more of? If I really want to increase my income and get better results, what should I be doing more of? The second way you can change things is you can do less of other things. So what should you be doing less of? You should be doing less of those things that are not contributing anything to your life. So what should you be doing less of? And since most of what you do, 80-20, 80% is useless, actually close to 90%, you know exactly what you need to stop doing if you have the discipline. Number 3 is you need to start doing something new. And most major changes in your life is when you start doing something you've never done before. And this is the hardest thing of all because the biggest enemy that we have is the comfort zone. It's the comfort zone that holds us back. It's a comfort zone that kills us. It's the comfort zone that causes us to keep slipping back into doing old things, useless things, things that we don't like, things that we don't want, things that don't help. So you are in a battle with the comfort zone. And Harvard did this big study last year, the year before, on business model regeneration, renovation. And what they found is the senior executive said that we know we need to change our business model, but we can't because we're stuck in this comfort zone and we're afraid of trying something new or different. We're afraid of trying something new or different. That's why I learned that insight when I was a young man in my 20s is that things don't work the first time. And now they're finding that if you start something new in business, it's not going to work. Minimum 4 times, 4 iterations before it'll work, sometimes 14, sometimes 34. I read a story in Harvard Business Review last month, and this company tried 34 different business models before they found a business model that worked, almost like an engine that starts up or the electric light bulb that actually works. And the 34th business model created a billion-dollar business. But they have to keep trying and keep fighting the tendency to slip back into the comfort zone. Many people try once or twice and then abandon it. And then the 4th way that you can change is you can stop doing something altogether. And this is one of the very best ways to change your life. There's so many things in your life right now that you know you should stop doing. So what are your answers? So here's the question. Rule is you cannot save time, you can only spend it differently. You cannot save time, you can only spend it differently. The time is going to pass in any case. The only question is what will you be doing during that time? So what are you going to do more of? What are you going to do less of? What are you going to start doing? What are you going to stop doing? And turn to the person at your table and tell them one answer to one of those questions. What kind of pops into your mind? Everybody has something pop into their mind. More or less, start or stop. And for the rest of your career, whenever you're frustrated with your results, what should I do more of, less of, start or stop? And there's always an answer. And the answer can change your life. The answer can make the difference between average income and wealth. No. We'll do it when I get to your house or you get to my house. That's a great idea. Just time constraints. Okay, moving along now. Now this sounds very simple, but from now on, whenever you have a goal, ask these 4 questions. Whenever you have a problem or a block, ask these 4 questions. Whenever you have an obstacle, ask the 4 questions. And it's quite astonishing. If you ask the questions and you just remain open, actually one of the things that we've learned is always believe that there's a solution. And the solution is in one of these 4 questions. You'll always find it. It's almost like there's a diamond in amongst the wheat, and if you absolutely believe it, it's there. It's there. The ability to have positive expectations is quite astonishing. Now this leads us to the highest paid work that we do. And that's another question. What is the highest paid, most valuable work that you do? And the answer is thinking. Thinking is the most important work that you do. And why? And we work this all out. The potential consequences of your thinking makes thinking the most important and valuable activity you engage in. Now here's a balloon popper, and it's something I learned when I began studying time management, is that something is important in life to the degree to which there are big potential consequences for doing it or not doing it. The magic word is consequences. Something is unimportant if there are low or no consequences. So you'll find that big people, important people, do things with big potential consequences. If they do them or don't do them, it's going to be important. If they do them and do them well, it's going to be important. If they do not spend their time doing things of low or no consequences. Warren Buffett is great one-liners. Warren Buffett was asked, what is your secret to success? And this is all written down. He said, my secret to success is that I say no to everything. No matter what people want, I say no. If you ask me to do something, I say no. The answer is no. No, 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 no. There is a principle that's not in this course, but basically it's called the law of 3. It says that if you make a list of everything that you have to do in a week or a month, you'll come up with 20 or 30 or sometimes more tasks. But if you go over the tasks, you'll find that only 3 of those account for 90% of all the value of everything you do. Only 3 of the things you do have any consequences at all. All the rest are simply time passers, time wasters. They have no difference at all. If you do them or don't do them, it makes no difference. So you always think in terms of consequences. What are the consequences of doing this or not doing this? And there's only 3 tasks. And the question is, what are the 3 tasks? And it's interesting because Warren Buffett, starting from nothing, now the 2nd richest man in the world, he said that's what he's found. There's only 3 tasks, 2 to 3. In IBM, when IBM got into serious trouble and they turned it around, they taught this principle throughout IBM. There's only 3 things that you do that account for all the value that you contribute to this company. What are those 3 things? And whatever they are, do only those things. And I teach this at much greater length because I've written about it, but I can tell you this, that if all you did was work on your big 3 each day, all day, you'll double your income. Simple as that. And what do? You say no to everything except the big 3. And you think on paper. You do not start work without writing it down and analyzing it. And of all the things that I can do, which has the greatest potential consequences? The reason that people waste their lives is because they do things of no importance. They do things that don't matter. Now, thinking, when you think, your thinking determines the quality of your decisions. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your actions. The quality of your actions determines the quality of your results, and results are everything. So everything comes back to thinking. That's why your mother told you, take some time to think about it. Turn it over in your mind. Do not move quickly. Well, when I began to study this many years ago, and so about 2 years ago, I was approached by the biggest publisher in the world. And they asked me to write 2 books for them. They said, we would like you to write 2 books for us. And if anybody knows anything about publishing books, you'll know that that's absurd. It just never happens. You have to write a book, and sometimes you have to plod from door to door, from publisher to publisher for years before somebody will even look at your manuscript. But because I have published so many books, they came to me. And I said, okay, I'd like to write a book called Thinking for a Change. And what I did is I had been developing over the years 10 different ways of thinking which contrast with each other. This is what how successful people think. This is how unsuccessful people think. And I put this book together, and they said they didn't like the title, so they changed the title to Get Smart. how to think the way the most successful people in our society think and act. And so we published the book last year, and it's a top seller worldwide. It's called Get Smart. And it contrasts 10 different ways of thinking. And they're really neat ideas. I mean, you have a lot of fun with them. But the last chapter, which is the biggest chapter, is rich thinking versus poor thinking. How do rich people think? And how do they develop this thinking? Napoleon Hill found that all rich people think differently from poor people. No one was born with these thinking skills, and all of them are learnable. And so if you just start to think and then decide and then act like rich people, you soon start to get the same results that rich people get. And if you don't, you don't. And nature's neutral. The universe is neutral. If you think like rich people, you get rich people's results. And if you don't, you don't. And people say, Now the logical thing would be to say, well, how do rich people think? There's a good question. And now I'm finding I'm being asked to speak on this subject all over the world, including yesterday. I've been asked to do a special seminar on a full-day seminar overseas on the contrast between rich and poor thinking. And so if you want to be wealthy, this is how you think. And then you think, how do they think in business? How do they think in relationships? How do they think in hiring? How do they think in investing? How do they think with regard to money? And these are all learnable skills. Just like you can learn to type. Some people learn to type a different language. You learn to type English. Everybody else learns to type their language. You can learn any new way of thinking that you want. And if you learn that way of thinking, you get that way of results. You think, well, it can't be that simple. Yes, it is. Because if a person comes from a poor background and works their way up and finally becomes wealthy and they lose all of their money in an economic crash or something else, well, a year later they make it all back again. They still got the thinking skill. The thinking skills are still there. They just make it all back again. And this we've heard so many times, thousands and thousands and thousands of times. So you can do that. Thinking is the most important thing of all. Now here's what we found with regard to thinking, is this is how most people think. And this is basically the first chapter, is they think in what is called stimulus response. Something happens, they immediately respond. Something happens inside of them. They get an idea, they read something, they see something, somebody tells them something, and they immediately respond without hesitation. So the stimulus and the response are almost simultaneous. However, the superior, that's the normal thinking process. The superior thinking process is they have a stimulus, and then they have a response, but in between they put a pause. And the thought between the action and the reaction determines your entire life. And now we're finding one of the characteristics of rich people is rich people take time to think before they respond. They take time to think before they act. They take time to think even before they speak. Is they put a gap so that their mind gets a chance to work with the information and turn it over in their mind before they actually do something. And so most of the mistakes that people make are they act too quickly. They don't take enough time to think through what they're doing. And then you find that the smartest people of all, it's one of my chapters, it's called Informed versus Uninformed Thinking, is you'll find that the most successful people get a lot of information before they make an important decision that has a lot of consequences. If it has no consequences, like ordering from a buffet, do it quickly. But if it has big potential consequences, and once you've made the decision, you can't go back, then they'll take a lot of time to think. My first real mentor, I call him the big boss. I use the words the big boss because all over the world, everybody knows what the big boss is. When working with the big boss, he started with nothing, and he was worth $800 million when I worked with him. And he took me under his wing, and he would bring me down to his office for an hour to 2 hours every evening when the offices were closed, about 5:30 to about 7 p.m., and we would sit and talk. And he did not have, at his level, he owned more than 200 companies. At his level, he didn't have people that he could just talk to freely, but he could talk to me. And so he would. And I would shut the you-know-what up, the heck up. You thought I was thinking of another word, weren't you? So I shut the heck up, and I listened. And I would ask him questions and listen. And my wife always knew that I'd be home late for dinner. Well, my home was about 15, 20 minutes from the office, and she knew that we would have dinner at 7:30 because if I was not there, it meant that the big boss had invited me down to his office, and he just talked about life and business and money and decisions and things like that. To this day, as I sit here, I can still see those times, and they were some of the most important times of my life. And he was smart. He had what is called a photographic memory, in that he could take a contract like this. He could take a contract and read it from the back. He'd read it from the back page. 40, 50 pages, like this. He'd read it. This we need to actually check it with the lawyers, because I think this. And 6 months later, I could come in and say, we're working on this. And he'd say, well, what happened to the clause on page 23? He could remember the contract 6 months later. I had to carry it around with me and look it up. But my point in telling you this story is that whenever he had a big decision, a decision with consequences to make, he would always punt it for a day, 2 days, 3 days, a weekend, a week. He would put it off. He said, let me think about that. From my young, amateurish perspective, it was a 2 + 2 question. Well, the answer's simple, I would say to him. He said, there's maybe more to it. Let me think about it for a while. And he would just put it off. And then he would come in 2 or 3 days later, and he would say, I've been thinking about that discussion that we had about that decision. Yes. He said, this is what I think we'll do. And he would start to explain it like a machine, like a computer. And he have insights into what to do, what not to do, what the danger spots were, ways that we could take advantage of it. And I would just sit there just like a baby and listening to him, because he was so smart. But he never made a decision quickly, even though he's one of the smartest persons that somebody ever met in their life. He always punted an important decision. He always took a few days to think about it. I never forgot that. It's just a little, he'd say, it's just a little bit too early to make a decision. We need to get more information. We need to be better informed. Okay, so the key is responsibility. And this is a really great historical concept, is that people are successful to the degree to which they can respond effectively. If they can't respond effectively, then they'll always make decisions, and bad decisions, and the bad decisions will lead to mistakes, and the mistakes can kill you. They can actually sink a business. They can sink a career, because they don't take the time to think about it. So, and I can tell you, my favorite 2 words, and there are lots of people in this room who can identify with, my favorite 2 words with regard to money are the words due diligence. And I thought and taught and learned and shared due diligence for decades, and then I didn't do it in a large investment. And it was the worst mistake I ever made financially. I recovered from it, mind you, but from then on, due diligence is everything. I could walk around with a sign, due diligence, due diligence. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Biggest mistakes that we make in life is we don't check enough first. We don't think enough about them. So this brings us to zero-based thinking. And the question is there anything in your life that, knowing what you now know, you wouldn't get into again today if you had to do it over? And the answer is, of course. There are so many things that we wouldn't get into. And I learned this technique of thinking decades ago. And what I have found is that the smartest people in the world use this technique. So I do strategic planning for corporations. The first strategic planning job I did was for $1 billion company with huge branch offices, a department store company all across the country. And I had done some management training with them. And they said, is there anything else that you can do with us? We like the way you think. And I said, well, I do strategic planning. Because I'd written it down as a goal. I wanted to do strategic planning. And I had never done it before. And so I said, yes, I do strategic planning. Yes, me, strategic planning. I'm the one. And said, well, let's look into that. And they did their due diligence. And they did their research into my background. And they asked me a lot of questions. And the president said, all right, we'll turn over the company to you. And so I said, well, I read it in the books. We'll withdraw to a resort in the mountains for 3 days. And I will prepare a pre-work manual. So everybody will fill in all the answers to these questions. Then we'll all go to this resort. And then we will sit in a room for 3 days, around a large room. And I would take them through this entire process of strategic planning. They told me later it was the best 3 days in the history of the company. It was just so astonishing because it opened so many eyes, so many questions, so much stimulation. And after that, okay, we'll stop. What time would you like us to stop? 3 minutes? Perfect. Okay. And so I've now taught strategic planning all over the world to small companies and to large companies, to American companies and to international companies, even Russian companies and Indian companies and Asian companies, Chinese companies. And so this question is an incredible question because everyone has an answer to this. And if we don't ask and answer this question, we can go off in completely the wrong direction. So we say here, trying to get it. All right. So there is a series of questions here, and we are just about for a break, but ready for a break. So we're going to take a break now, and then we're going to come back, and then I'm going to ask you to answer these questions. And the questions are practicing zero-based thinking in different areas of your life. Is there any relationship, business or personal, that you wouldn't get into again today if you had to do it over? And I call this a Kwink analysis. Kwink, knowing what I now know. Is there anything that I'm doing in my life that I would not get into again if I had to do it over? And I know something about you, and you know something about me, that in times of turbulence today, all of us have at least one area, whether it's business, relationships, money, sales, products, services, commitments of any kind. We all have at least one area that is that we would never get into again. And how can you tell if you're in a zero-based thinking situation? It's very simple. It's called stress. It's called stress. Because whenever you experience resistance, stress, frustration, anxiety, you're not making progress or results, you're not getting ahead and so on, you have to ask yourself, if I was not doing this today, would I get into it again today? If the answer is no, then the next question is, how do you get out and how fast? And the reason is because once you answer no to this question, the situation is dead. It's over. It's finished. You cannot go back. You cannot save a situation. If you say, I would not go into this partnership. I've taught this with large groups of men and women. The average is 38% of husbands or wives would not get married to the person that they're married to again today if they had to do over. And the only reason they stay in the marriage is for economic reasons. They got all the bills and commitments and they have to keep their kids in school and so on. It's very common. I know a lot of people here are not making eye contact with me. But it's the same thing with products and services. Is there any product that you're offering? Is there any part of your business that you're doing that, knowing what you now know, you would not get into? So we'll come back and we'll revisit this at the end of the break. And when is the break? Well, how long is the break?
Well, actually, we're ready for break. But before we go to break, I'd like for you to tell them about what you have available at the back table.
Oh, okay. I do not sell books, by the way. The markup on them is very low. But we do have a book, because Howard has bought 300 copies of this book. It's Eat the Frog. This is the international bestseller. Best-selling book on time management in the world, and guaranteed, there's at least one. It's 21 chapters. At least one chapter will give you an insight to double your income. And they're all back here. We have one for everybody. And how are they going to be distributed? I go back and sign.
Well, what we're going to do, so here's our next steps. In just a minute before we break, you're going to go to the back of the table, get your books. Get one for yourself, buy them for your friends. You definitely want to get Brian's book. And then we're going to line up. So Brian's going to be doing book signing, and you definitely want to do this. This is before you go to lunch. So buy your book, go to the side here, line up against the wall, get your book signed, and by the time we get the books done, then lunch will be served out in the hallway there, and then we'll be ready for the rest of the afternoon.
Wonderful.
So, anything? Yes, you're going to get your plate and come back in here, but it won't be ready until after we go through the book signing process. So can we give a huge, huge round of applause to Brian Tarici? All right, we will see you get your books, do the signing, have lunch, and we'll be back starting at 1 o'clock.